So, like we discussed yesterday, it's early, and Brian Kelly is all about taking it slow and laying the foundation of preparation and not naming a starting quarterback or a starting left tackle or a starting DB too early in this process. But there are some things that you can notice early on, maybe some flashes of optimism for the future. So, what position group is emerging as particularly impressive in spring practice? Plus, where it stands right now. Is LSU's quarterback room one of the best in the SEC in terms of longevity? We'll get into all of that. Plus, it is Mailbag Wednesday, so we will get into your questions, all of that and more on today's edition of Locked On LSU.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. So make sure to follow me on Twitter at CarolineFenton1. I'll post podcast updates. I'll post all of my, LSU, college football, NFL, just sports world in general takes there. You can also interact with me there. If you have a question, it is Mailbag Wednesday. So if you have a question for next week's Mailbag Wednesday, make sure and you can send them into my Twitter, or you can send those into the Locked On LSU Twitter. So make sure to give that a follow as well at Locked On LSU. I'll post links to where you can find the podcast, both on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, whatever your preferred podcast platform is. You can find Locked On LSU there. Also, I'll post links to the YouTube video, so make sure to subscribe to Locked On LSU on YouTube. You'll get notified as soon as that video drops. So I understand if you're on the go, if you're in your car, if you're in the gym, whatever you want to listen to the podcast, totally can do that on whatever podcast platform you prefer. But also, if you're just hanging out and you want to watch the podcast, you can do that on YouTube. So make sure to subscribe, Locked On LSU. Now, Brian Kelly, as we know, hosted a 2-hour practice completely open to the media, which is something that honestly I have never heard of in college football, or at least in my tenure covering LSU football. So nice and refreshing, kind of a breath of fresh air from Brian Kelly there, just being so open to the media. But he discussed how he wants to approach this offseason, and that's slow. That's making sure that these players are prepared. That's making sure that, on April 6th, they're not naming a starting quarterback because there is still so much competition to come. There's still so much learning to come. But you can also see flashes of optimism for the future. You can see flashes of who's looking good, who's working hard, who's improving. So is there a position group that stands out more than any of the others, albeit early, and albeit Brian Kelly is a coach that wants to take a very tactful and intentful approach to this offseason? This is what Brian Kelly said was one position group that really stands out to him this early in the process.
I like the versatility of the safety group. There's a little bit more versatility that maybe I didn't see early on. You see, Brooks and Fouché and Sage and Tolles and, Davis is flipping around. I mean, there's a little bit more depth and flexibility at that position than maybe that I first thought. And that to me, again, we use words, like surprise but I'm more pleased with that result than maybe I was coming in.
So backtrack to National Signing Day, whenever free agency, I have NFL in the brain, whenever transfer portal transfers were coming in, cornerback was one of those positions that was a position of need, and it was something that concerned me. A team that has touted its defense as being its greatest strength for so long, especially that cornerback position, that defensive back position. LSU is DBU for a reason. It was a little bit concerning to me saying that corner was such a position of need, but hearing Brian Kelly say that, and albeit it is early, and I think I take even more out of that from Brian Kelly, for him being such a calculated coach and him being so committed to not committing to anything, if that makes sense. Him being so committed to not naming a starter right away or to not name anyone who really stands out yet. So I really take that to heart whenever Brian Kelly says that the cornerback position has so much more versatility and depth than he expected. Because, to be completely honest, that was a position group that was a little bit concerning to me. Now, he named a few defensive backs, Jordan Tolles being one of them, who has, played that both defensive back roles, been taking reps with the safeties and with the corners as well. So my first question, whenever Brian Kelly said, this was, the most versatile group, this is a group that he was really pleased with, was why? What is so versatile about them? All of the position groups, especially quarterback being the biggest buzz in the offseason, what stands out so much from this cornerback group? Now, I mentioned Jordan Tolles. He spoke with the media as well and answered why he thinks Brian Kelly thinks that the cornerback position has been so valuable and has emerged as being such a versatile position group so far in spring practice.
As a group, we've really been getting after it with covering ground, closing the post, diving down and taking the right angles to the ball when pursuing the ball. So I think that was the biggest improvement from the past to now. And Coach Cook's been doing a good job with emphasizing our footwork and understanding our leverages and our angles and having your right foot up when you come into the point of contact. So I think that's why Coach Kelly's so happy with it, because we're improving as we go.
And I think that is so key there, improving as we go. We see Derek Stingley, for instance, leaving the program this year. And I do want to get to more Derek Stingley talk tomorrow. There is LSU Pro Day tomorrow, so make sure to tune in to Locked On LSU tomorrow. We'll be breaking down Derek Stingley and the rest of LSU's Pro Day. But I know with Derek Stingley being such a dominant presence at that position, leaving the program, that was at least a concern of mine and probably a concern of yours, was where's the leadership at that cornerback position? But seeing that there has been so much improvement, not just day-to-day in spring practice, but year over year. I mean, the defense was one side of the ball that stood out to me in the 2021 season, that it seemed like there was a lot of confusion there. There was a lot of lack of preparation there. It seemed like the defense was always kind of constantly getting burned whenever they really shouldn't have been. A team that really had so many good players, so much talent on both sides of the ball, but especially on defense, they had so much talent. So it was confusing to me and befuddling to me about why there were so many teams in the SEC, especially, that were just burning LSU's defense. So good to hear that it's not just day-to-day improvement, it's also year over year as well. So the cornerback position really emerging itself as a strong point for this LSU team so far. And that's what I'll be looking forward to throughout the rest of spring practice and in interviews to come, is how can that cornerback position build upon itself, and how can that kind of trickle down into the rest of the defense, because defensive line is going to be an incredibly important position group this year. Linebacker, not a ton of depth at that linebacker position, very top heavy. So how can that cornerback position almost trickle down into the rest of the defense, and how can that influence the rest of the team as well, is something that I'll be looking forward to moving forward. Now, coming up next, one position group that I thought was one of LSU's biggest vulnerabilities about a couple months ago, that I now think is transforming into LSU's biggest strength, not just for 2022, but for years to come. I'll get into that coming up next. But before we do that, got to tell y'all about Built Bar. So this is the time of year that I've given up on all of my New Year's resolutions. It's April. It's not really as fun to go to the gym every morning. It's not really that fun to wake up every morning at 5:30, 6 a.m., whatever your New Year's resolution may be. But this year, it's so easy to stick to my resolution to eat right thanks to Built Bar. Because it's really not like a resolution, because I actually enjoy eating Built Bars. They taste like a candy bar, but they're so good for you. And the Puffs are one of Built Bar's best tasting new bars. They're the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate, just like all of the other Built Bars. They're all covered in 100% real chocolate, so they taste like candy, but they're so much better for you. They're low calorie, they're high protein, they're better than a candy bar because they taste like it, but you don't get all the bad stuff, because candy bars have like 240 calories as opposed to Built Bar, which only has about 130. Candy bars have 30 grams of sugar, but most Built Bars only have about 4. They have dozens of net carbs in candy bars in your typical candy bar. And in Built Bars, there's only 4 net carbs and there's 17 grams of protein. So if you're on the go all the time, like I am, keep a Built Bar in your car, in your purse, and bring it around with you as a midday snack, and you will stay full all day long. And you don't have to compromise taste with Built Bars. They have flavors like mint brownie, coconut almond, white chocolate cookies and cream, all new this month. They're all delicious, and new flavors are coming out all the time. So check their website to see what new flavors are coming out, because they are always coming up with new flavors. And they're always all about the taste. Built Bar makes it taste delicious first, then they figure out how to pack all the good, healthy things in there. And I don't know how they do it, but they pull it off every single time. So you should try Built Bars for yourself. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15, and get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com.
I think I learned a lot from last year, especially being a true freshman, getting to play in some real SEC time. You learn a lot, and I think for me personally, the biggest thing was just kind of being more of a manager of an offense. And for some reason I got this like gunslinger, thing everybody says, but trying to just block that out. Yeah, I can take some shots and make some different throws with my arm, but that's going to happen in a game, and I can't look to do that every play. So that's kind of what I've learned: just manage the offense, move the sticks.
That was LSU quarterback Garrett Nussmeier. And of course, he's been a part of this LSU quarterback core since last year. And about a couple months ago, I said on the podcast, and I meant it wholeheartedly, that the quarterback position was one of my biggest fears for the 2022 season, maybe one of the most vulnerable position groups for this LSU team. And I cited being so freaking frustrated year after year that there's so much talent on both sides of the ball in these teams, and there's no quarterback to kind of elevate the rest of those players around them. Because you're not going to win the national championship every single year. You're not going to win the SEC championship every single year without a quarterback that is a solid game manager. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean that in a good way. A solid game manager, somebody who has good control over the game, over the offense, somebody who can read defenses very well. And that's just not something that LSU has had very frequently in the past. So I was really concerned, especially about Max Johnson leaving the program, about what the future of this quarterback position holds. Now, of course, Garrett Nussmeier has been a part of this quarterback position as I for the past 2 years. And the reason why I feel so much more comfortable about the quarterback position is bringing Jaden Daniels in, creating a little bit more of a quarterback competition. But I cite Garrett Nussmeier as the reason why I sit here, a couple months after I was so fearful for this season in the quarterback position, feeling so confident for the future. And it was listening to Garrett Nussmeier's remarks to the media after spring practice on Saturday. It made me realize, it hit me. Oh my gosh, LSU is set up for so much success at the quarterback position for a very long time. I focused on Jaden Daniels and Miles Brennan, especially for the 2022 season. Those are the most experienced quarterbacks. Those are the quarterbacks where it feels like those are the two that are really competing for this starting spot. But LSU also has Garrett Nussmeier in their back pocket. A player who's a true freshman this past year, and he will be around in the program for at least 3 to 4 more years. Having his redshirt year this past season, and he's a young player who already has in-game SEC experience. He's a young player who already knows what he needs to improve upon in this year. And that's taking control of the game. And that's understanding that your job as a quarterback, the most important thing that you can do is take care of the ball. And as he said, move the sticks. That's not something that, a redshirt sophomore quarterback or a redshirt freshman quarterback always has a good grasp on, because they don't have in-game experience. So albeit this past year, it wasn't an ideal situation for the quarterback position at LSU, but Garrett Nussmeier being able to come in, and albeit it was very limited snaps, him being able to come in and really and able to learn enough about the position, learn enough to be able to learn about how he can improve, I think is huge. LSU is in a good position this year. They've got two veterans that are, kind of battling it out for this starting position, and those veterans will be gone eventually. And then there will be Garrett Nussmeier ready to take the reins with in-game experience and having this mentality of, what I can improve upon moving forward. Now, I think you can make the argument that LSU is probably set up for the future better than any other quarterback core in the SEC. I look at Georgia, for example. I don't think that Stetson Bennett is a national championship winning quarterback if Georgia doesn't have the defense that they had. Now, I'm not going to put it past Kirby Smart to be able to develop and recruit some really solid quarterbacks in the future. But with Georgia being in the hands of Stetson Bennett, I think that LSU's in a better position. I'll put it at that. And I know that sounds crazy, Georgia being the reigning national championship, but I don't think there's anything that Stetson Bennett did, in my opinion, that just blew my socks off. And I look at Texas A&M. I look at who brought in the top quarterback prospect in this graduating class. But they've got Haynes King and Max Johnson in kind of the very near future. And albeit Max Johnson did some really great things for this LSU program, and he has plenty of SEC experience, I do wonder if maybe Max Johnson was put in at LSU sooner than he was really ready, just because Miles Brennan, he was lost very suddenly due to injury. And I do wonder if Max Johnson has a little bit of PTSD from being in those games a little bit sooner than he really should have. Questionable decision making, the accuracy was an issue. Now, Texas A&M does have a good track record of being able to develop quarterbacks, but I think I look at Jaden Daniels, and I look at Miles Brennan in the near future, and also Garrett Nussmeier and Walker Howard in the further future, and I think that LSU just has more depth there. And I look at Alabama, and they are going to absolutely recruit great quarterbacks for years to come. That's not going to be something that is going to change. But I think that they absolutely can look at LSU as being one of those teams in the SEC that is equipped to compete at a very high level with the quarterback position, one of the best in the SEC. And I think that Garrett Nussmeier having such a solid and mature approach to this quarterback competition in his role at LSU football, I think is just absolutely proving of that. Now, coming up next, it's Mailbag Wednesday, so I want to get into some of your questions. I cherry-picked all of the LSU football questions today since there is LSU Pro Day tomorrow. Wanted to get all of our LSU football thoughts put out there, so we'll get into that coming up next. But before we do that, I got to tell you all about Rock Auto. So this episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's so difficult to just go into your local auto parts store and say, hey, I need this piece, I need this part, I need this piece to go along with my car. They often don't have those in stock. So there's really no point in, enduring the intimidating questioning of, is your car this make, this model? What kind of oil does your car need? I don't know. I'm not into cars and I don't know. And it's pointless to just sit there in the waiting room and, just wasting hours of your day waiting for them to order the parts on their computer, when you can just do it on your own computer, choosing the only brand or any brand that Rock Auto has to carry. You have access to a computer. You have access to rockauto.com to take advantage of it. Save time and also money when using Rock Auto. A lot of other places, a lot of chain stores or car dealerships may jack up their prices up to 30, 15, even 100%. For example, a chain store, a typical Honda Odyssey fuel pump is $353. From Rock Auto, it's only $216. So you've got over $100 in savings there. Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer, and you know that you can count on Rock Auto. So go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in there, how did you hear about us box, so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need, rockauto.com. Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. Now, today is your day. It is a Mailbag Wednesday. So I'll take all of as many LSU football-related questions as I can this week, and I'll make sure to get back to kind of all-encompassing LSU questions next week. So if you have a question about LSU football, basketball, baseball, whatever it may be, make sure to send those questions in. You can send them in on Twitter at CarolineFenton1 or at Locked On LSU. But first and foremost, we have a person sending in a question that says that Derek Stingley's draft stock has seemed to have dropped in the last couple of mock drafts. How concerned are you about that? To be completely honest with you, it doesn't concern me a lot. Derek Stingley Jr. is going to be a first-round pick, and which is saying something that he hasn't played a full season since the 2019 season. He's been riddled with injuries. He's been in and out of the lineup. He wasn't able to perform at the combine, so it would be really difficult, as an NFL general manager, to get up there and say that we're drafting this guy who we haven't seen a ton from as of recently. So it honestly doesn't surprise me, and it doesn't concern me that Derek Stingley's draft stock is falling, because I think he went from being a top 10 pick, and I think in Todd McShay's latest mock draft, at least on ESPN.com, he was slated to be picked 16. I forgot what team is picking 16th, but you get the point. That he's dropped a few spots. It really doesn't shock me for a couple of reasons, injuries being one of them, and also at the very beginning of all of this draft discussion, we heard so much about this being a poor quarterback draft. I don't really know if that's something that I necessarily subscribe to completely, because in the 2017 draft, that was supposedly a weak quarterback class that was, being completely held up by Mitchell Trubisky. Mitch Trubisky was supposed to be the greatest thing since sliced bread in terms of quarterbacks, but we found out later Mitch Trubisky isn't the greatest thing since sliced bread, and Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes were two other quarterbacks taken in that 2017 draft. So be wary of what the draft gurus will tell you. But I think over time, a lot of NFL teams' quarterback needs have made themselves relevant. So I think that a lot of quarterbacks may be going earlier in the draft than maybe a lot of draft analysts may have initially anticipated. So that could have pushed Derek Stingley's draft stock down as well. I don't think that's any poor reflection of LSU football. I don't think that's any bad thing in terms of LSU. I think it all has to do with the needs of the NFL and, and just the fact that Derek Stingley hasn't been healthy as of late. So if I'm an NFL team, that's a really tough kind of gamble to make. But he'll go in the first round. I feel pretty confident about that. And I feel that once he's healthy and once he's able to get into a solid, consistent training program, then he is going to be a force to be reckoned with in the NFL. Another person asks, and this has been a question that has popped up a lot over the past couple of weeks in Mailbag Wednesday, and also when we had Dylan Sanders on the show last week talking about spring practice, is what kind of an impact do you think Tyrann Mathieu was able to make on this team? And I've seen the video of him speaking to LSU football, and it's incredibly moving. Talking about his path. He was a player that had a ton of red flags in his draft profile. I mean, he was a player who was dismissed by the team. He was a player who had off the field issues. I mean, Tyrann Mathieu isn't the biggest guy in the whole entire world. He's 5'9", 5'10". And in NFL standards, if you're going to be an NFL caliber defensive back, that's small. So I think it was very moving hearing, his testament to LSU, the LSU program, the state of Louisiana as a whole, and also his journey throughout the NFL. I think that's incredibly moving. And I think just his presence on the field elevated everything. It elevated the players themselves. It elevated the expertise coming from the on-the-field coaches. He was on the field in practice, looking at what everyone was doing, taking notes. He looked like a certified LSU coach out there. So I think that there are so many aspects in bringing Tyrann Mathieu back. And also, to flip it to the Brian Kelly side of things, it was a really good testament to LSU football from Brian Kelly. Because I think so many times it happens with coaching and it happens in a lot of walks of life. Whenever you enter something completely new, let's say at a new job, or, as a new coach, if in a new relationship, whatever it may be, a lot of coaches or, person that you're in a relationship with or employees, their first inclination is feeling a little bit of jealousy or maybe insecurity about what came before me. And I think Brian Kelly has done a wonderful job of embracing what did come before him and acknowledging the fact that that's not going to go away. The history of LSU football is not going to go away. So he can either embrace it or he can bury it. And I think that bringing in Tyrann Mathieu is just one move of many that he has done to say, look, I'm embracing this team. And I want y'all to know that, I am. And I want y'all to know that, even though I'm not from here, even though I haven't been here since Tyrann Mathieu walked these halls, he can give you a firsthand account of what this team can do for you and what this team can set you up for. We'll get into more questions of y'all's next week for next Mailbag Wednesday, so make sure to send those in. Again, on Twitter, at CarolineFenton1 or at Locked On LSU. But that is going to do it for me today. Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. Coming up tomorrow, we'll have a full recap of LSU's Pro Day, who really stood out, whose draft stock may be moving, going up, going down, whatever that may be, and what the players themselves have to say about their entrance into the NFL. We'll get into that on tomorrow's episode. Now make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It is free and available wherever you get your podcasts.